So it's been quite some time since I've talked about the Friday the 13th series on the channel, and in today's video I want to give my thoughts on Friday the 13th Part 3. And when it comes to the things I want to talk about within this video itself, I just want to talk about what Friday the 13th Part 3 is about, give my thoughts on Chris Higgins as the final girl, talk about a couple side characters that I liked in the film, talking about that iconic moment when Jason gets his hockey mask, other moments that stood out to me, as well as sharing my personal experience with Friday the 13th Part 3 as well. So this should be a fun video. I'm excited to get into the groove again and talk about horror related content on the channel. So without further ado, let's get straight into this. So first things first, what is this movie all about? Well, it picks up right after Part 2 left off, with Jason Voorhees still lurking around Crystal Lake after his last rampage. This time though, we're following a new group of characters who decided to spend a weekend at a place called Higgins Haven, which is basically a barn house combo near the infamous lake. It's classic 80s horror, teens, bad decisions, and a killer who just won't quit. The main character is Chris Higgins, who's got some history with the area that gets revealed as the movie goes on. She's joined by her friends, and let me tell you, they're the kind of group you expect in a slasher flick. There's the stoner duo, the prankster, the couple who can't keep their hands off each other, and a few others who are just along for the ride. Naturally, Jason starts picking them off one by one, and the tension builds as Chris realizes she's got to face this masked maniac. It's straightforward, but that's part of the charm. What sets Part 3 apart is that it's the first time this series went into 3D. Yep, it's got that early 80s gimmick where stuff like pitchforks and eyeballs pop out at you. Back in 1982, that must have been wild to see in theaters. The plot itself isn't super deep, it's more about the kills and the atmosphere, but it's got this raw energy that keeps you hooked. Plus, it's got that iconic moment where Jason gets his hockey mask, but I'll save that for later in the video. Overall, the movie's about survival, jump scares, and Jason stepping up as the unstoppable force we know today. It's not trying to win Oscars, but it knows exactly what it is, a fun, bloody ride. And for me, it's one of those sequels that doesn't overthink things and just delivers what fans want. Alright, so let's talk about Chris Higgins, the final girl of Friday the 13th Part 3. I gotta say, she's one of the more interesting leads in the series for me. Played by Dana Kimmel, Chris isn't just some random scream queen. She's got a backstory that actually ties her to Jason. Turns out she had a run-in with him years ago when she was a kid, which left her traumatized. That adds a layer to her character that I really appreciate, even if the movie doesn't fully dive into it. And what I like about Chris is how she's not your typical final girl stereotype. She's not super tough or overly resourceful at first. She's just a regular person who's trying to enjoy a weekend with her friends. But when things go south, you see her switch gears. She's scared, yeah, but she's also determined. And I think Dana Kimmel does a great job showing that shift. There's this quiet strength to her that comes out, especially in the final showdown with Jason. That said, she's not perfect, and I kind of love that about her. She makes some dumb moves, like why would you hide in a barn when you know he's out there? But it feels human. She's not a superhero, she's just trying to survive. Compared to someone like Ginny from Part 2 who was all about outsmarting Jason, Chris feels more reactive, which makes her stand out in her own way. It's less about strategy, more about raw instinct. By the end, when she's swinging that axe and screaming her head off, I'm totally rooting for her. She's not my all-time favorite final girl, but she's got a vibe that fits this movie perfectly. That mix of vulnerability and grit makes her memorable for me. Now let's chat about some of the side characters in Friday the 13th Part 3 who really caught my eye. This movie's got a pretty colorful cast, and even though they're mostly there to be Jason's victims, a few of them left an impression on me. First up, there's Shelly, the prankster guy with the curly hair and the bad jokes. He's kind of a loser, but in a way that's oddly endearing, but he's always trying to fit in even if his pranks annoy everyone. Shelly's the one who accidentally gives Jason his hockey mask, which is huge, but I'll get to that later. What I like about him is how he's not just some cannon fodder. He's got personality, sure, he's awkward, maybe a little pathetic, But I feel for the guy. When he meets his end, I was actually bummed out, which doesn't happen with every slasher sidekick. He's one of those characters who could have been a total throwaway but ends up sticking with you. Then there's the stoner couple, Chuck and Chili. These two are so laid back, it's almost funny. Like they're just chilling with their weed while Jason's out there sharpening his machete. Chuck's this scruffy dude with a goofy grin, and Chili's got this sassy energy that I vibe with. They don't do much plot-wise, but they bring a lightness to the movie that balances out the gore. Their deaths are brutal though. I still wince thinking about Chuck getting fried on that fuse box. The last one I'll mention is Vera, the tough girl who's not really part of the main clique. She's got this no-nonsense attitude, and I respect how she doesn't put up with Shelly's nonsense. Her death scene with the spear gun is one of the wildest in the movie, especially with that 3D effect. These characters might not get a ton of screen time, but they make the world of Part 3 feel alive. Okay, so this is the big one. Jason getting his hockey mask in Friday the 13th Part 3. This is the moment that defines the franchise for me. Up until this point, Jason's been rocking that burlap sack with the eye hole, which was creepy in its own way, but it wasn't iconic. Then comes Shelly, our awkward prankster, who's messing around with this white hockey mask with the red stripes. He uses it to scare Vera, and I'm sitting there thinking, oh man, this is it. This is where it all changes. So how does Jason get it? Well, after Shelly's unfortunate run-in with Jason in the barn, our killer finds the mask lying around, he puts it on, and bam. There's that shot of him stepping out fully transformed. It's such a simple moment, but it's so powerful. That mask turns him from some backwoods psycho into the Jason Voorhees we all know and love, or fear, depending how you look at it. I get chills every time I see it. But what's cool is how it wasn't even planned to be this huge thing. It just happened organically in the story. The filmmakers were like, hey, let's try this, and it stuck. I can't imagine Jason without that mask now. It's his signature, his brand. The fact that it comes from a random side character like Shelly makes it even better. Like fate handed it to him. And watching that scene, I always felt like I was witnessing history. It's not just a costume change, it's Jason stepping into his legacy. Every time I rewatch Part 3, I'm hyped for that moment. It's the turning point that made him a horror legend. There's so much more to Friday the 13th Part 3 that I can't skip over. Some moments really stick with me. One thing that always gets me is the opening scene with the shop owners Harold and Edna. It's this little slice of weirdness before the main story kicks in. Harold's eating junk food and feeding his pets while Edna's nagging him about everything. It's random, but it sets this gritty, lived-in tone that I love. Plus, their deaths are so over the top with that 3D knitting needle, it's pure campy fun. Another standout is the motorcycle gang showing up at Higgins Haven. You got Allie, Fox, and Loco, these tough punks who roll and looking in for trouble. They're not part of Chris's crew, which makes their class with Jason feel fresh. I especially dig Fox's scene in the barn, where she's swinging on the ropes like she owns the place. And then Jason just shuts it down. It's quick, but it adds this extra layer of chaos to the movie that I wasn't expecting. The 3D kills deserve a shout out too, like Vera's spear gun death, that moment where it comes right at this camera. I can only imagine how nuts that was in the theaters back in 1982. It's cheesy now, of course, but I loved how they leaned into that gimmick. Every kill feels like it's trying to one-up the last. The eyeball pop from Rick's death is another one that's burned into my brain. It's gross, but I can't look away. Finally, there's that dream sequence at the end where Chris thinks she's safe, only for Jason's mom to pop out of the lake. It's a total mind bender after everything she's been through. It's not a perfect movie, but these little moments give it so much personality. They're what makes me keep coming back to Part 3. They're weird, wild, and totally unforgettable. So let's wrap this up with my personal experience of Friday the 13th Part 3. I first saw this movie when I was way too young, probably around 12 or 13 years old. My older cousin had a stack of VHS tapes, and this was the one we popped in during a sleepover. I remember being equal parts terrified and fascinated. Jason was this hulking monster, and that 3D stuff, even on a blurry tape, felt so real. Rewatching it as an adult, I caught things I didn't notice back then. Like I used to think it was just mindless slashing, but now I see how it's got its charm that's hard to explain. It's not polished, and the acting is kind of rough, but that's what makes it feel real to me. I love throwing it on during a lazy weekend. It's comfort food in horror form. There's something about that early 80s vibe that hits different. I've probably seen it a dozen times now, and every viewing brings something new. Sometimes I'm all about the kills, other times I'm focused on Chris or the goofy side characters. Not a masterpiece, but it's my kind of movie, you know? It's got a special place in my horror-loving heart. But other than that, those are my thoughts on Friday the 13th Part 3. I'm glad I finally had the time to talk about this film and the franchise, because like I said, it's been quite some time since I continued that series that I started a few months ago talking about the Friday the 13th franchise. So I want to ask you guys the question, how do you guys feel about Friday the 13th Part 3? Do you like it? Do you dislike it? Do you have anything you guys want to let me know about the movie as a whole? Be sure to let me know in the comment section down below. And if you enjoy the content on this channel, as always, be sure to like and subscribe. I'd really appreciate it. If you guys want to follow me on my social media, be sure to check out my X, Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. All the links to those are located in the description below. Be sure to click on that bell for notifications so you guys are notified whenever I'm dropping a video on the channel. But other than that, I hope all the guys are having a fantastic day, wherever the day may be, if it's the daytime, the nighttime, or the evening. And I'll see you guys in the next video. As always, peace out.